Let me tell you my true story. Not too long ago, I realized what Kunekune really is. I realized exactly what it is. I was reading stories about it on some websites with my mother, and we were getting all worked up chatting about it, when suddenly I realized exactly what it is. Suddenly I was overcome with dizziness, and I grew awfully tired. Still, I finally knew what Kunekune really was. I have to tell Mum, I thought, and I tried desperately to tell her. Mum, I think I know what Kunekune is, for real, I said. The smile disappeared from her face, and she glared at me. Don't say it. Don't even think it. Forget it, she screamed. After that, I don't remember anything. I suddenly remembered all that today, but I don't remember what Kunekune is. What on earth happened there? Why did I lose my memories? I'm not brave enough to ask my mother about it, but to me, it's like a horror story. P.S. As I was writing this, I suddenly had a clear and vivid image of a white snake in my head, like some kind of god. Is that Kunekune? Seriously, I'm being for real here. Hey guys, I'm your host Tara A. Devlin, and welcome to another episode of Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. As you can probably tell from this week's episode title and the opening story, this episode is dedicated to all sorts of tales told about Kunekune. Who or what is Kunekune? We're about to get into that, and chances are good that you're at least familiar with the main story. I've even featured it on this show before. As far as we know, stories of Kunekune first appeared on Nichan in 2001, before the story was solidified by another poster in 2003. Ever since then, it's taken on a life of its own and become as popular as the likes of Hashaku-sama or Kisaragi Station. In fact, there is a collection of stories called the Kunekune 7, and that's where we'll be starting our episode this week. These 7 tales are, as the name suggests, the stories that started it all. The stories that solidified Kunekune's fame. These are the 7 stories people think of when they hear the word Kunekune. Who or what is Kunekune? Let's dig in and find out with the Kunekune 7. Number 1. You're better off not knowing. This is a true story I heard from my younger brother. It's apparently something his friend A-kun experienced. When A-kun was younger, he went with his mother and older brother to visit the countryside. It was sunny out, and the rice fields were lush and green. Even though it was such nice weather outside, the 2 boys didn't feel like going out, so they hung around inside to play. Then suddenly, his older brother stood up and moved over to the window. A-kun followed him, and when he looked in the same direction as his brother, he saw a person in the distance. It was a person wearing all white. From the window, it was difficult to tell if it was a man or a woman. They were too far away. And they were standing all alone. What are they doing over there? A-kun thought, and continued watching. Then the person in white started swaying back and forth. Are they dancing? Then the person in white started to bend in unnatural ways. It was not a way in which a human could move. Swaying, swaying, swaying. Feeling strange, A-kun asked his brother, "Hey, what is that? Can you see it?" "I don't know," his brother answered. But right after he said it, his brother seemed to understand exactly what that person in white was. "You know what it is? Tell me," A-kun said. However, his brother refused to answer, only saying, Yeah, but you're better off not knowing. So, what the hell was that thing? Even now, A-kun doesn't know. Why doesn't he just ask his brother again? I said to my own younger brother. Even for me, that story wasn't really enough to chew on. But then my brother said, A-kun's older brother is mentally disabled now. Number 2. Kunekune. This happened when I went to visit my grandmother's house in Akita Prefecture as a child. We only went to visit her house once a year, during Obon. So, as soon as we got there, I took off at full speed with my older brother to play outside. It's entirely different to the city. The air is so fresh and clean. I took in the refreshing breeze as my brother and I ran around in the rice fields. Then, as the sun rose high in the sky and stood right above us, the wind suddenly stopped. Well, that's what I thought, but then a disgustingly warm breeze blew instead. It's already hot at the best of times. Why is such a warm breeze blowing now? I complained, angry that the cool breeze had been snatched away from me. I noticed my brother was looking in another direction, towards a scarecrow in the distance. "What's up with that?" I asked him. "No, not that. Past that," he replied, and strained his eyes even harder to see. I wanted to see as well, and looked intently over the rice fields. Then I saw it. What was that? It was far in the distance, so I couldn't tell what it was. It was about the size of a human, but it was white and swaying to and fro. There was nothing around but rice fields, and no reason for any people to be nearby. For a moment I felt strange, but then I tried to explain it away. "Isn't that just a new type of scarecrow? It has to be. Until now, scarecrows have never moved, so a farmer or someone must have thought it up. It probably started moving with that wind just before." My brother's expression said that he agreed with my precise explanation, but in an instant, it disappeared. The wind had stopped, and yet the white thing in the distance was still swaying. "Hey, that thing's still moving. What the hell is it?" he said, surprise in his voice. He wanted to know what it was, so he returned to the house and came back with a pair of binoculars. He seemed excited. "I'm going to take a look first, so just wait a minute," he said, and eagerly peered through the binoculars. Then suddenly, his face changed. Before my eyes, he started to turn blue and broke out into a cold sweat. Finally, he dropped the binoculars he was holding. Terrified of my brother's transformation, I asked him, "What is it?" He answered me, very slowly, "You're better off not knowing." It wasn't my brother's voice. Just like that, he turned and steadily returned to the house. I went to pick up the binoculars to look at what turned my brother's face blue. But perhaps because of what he said, I couldn't find the courage to do it. But something was bothering me. From far away, it just looked like something white, swaying strangely. It was a little weird, but other than that, it wasn't especially scary. But my brother, I had to look. I had to see what my brother saw. "You're that scary, huh? Well, I'll decide that with my own 2 eyes." I picked up the fallen binoculars and went to look. my father suddenly came running towards me. Before I could even ask, "What's wrong?" my father rushed at me. "Don't look at that white thing! Did you see it? Did you look at it through the binoculars?" "No, not yet," I replied, confused. "Oh, thank God," my father said, falling to the ground in relief. We went back to the house. I had no idea what was going on. When we got back, everyone was crying. Was this because of me? No, not me. When I looked closer, I could see my brother laughing like a madman. He was moving about like that white thing, swaying, swaying. Seeing my brother like that, he was scarier than whatever that thing outside was. Then, when it was time for us to return home, my grandmother said, "It would be better for everyone if you left him here. It'll be easier for him here. Your place is small, and if you think about your neighbors, they won't wait even a few days before. Leave him here. The best thing to do is release him into the rice fields after a few years." Hearing those words, I broke out into tears. I'd never see my brother like he was again. Even if we came back again the following year, that wouldn't be my brother. Why did this happen? We were just playing around, having fun. Why? I furiously wiped my tears and got into the car. We pulled away from the house. As our grandparents waved goodbye, just for a moment, I thought I saw my brother wave too. As we got further away, I wanted to see my brother's face one more time, so I looked through the binoculars. He was most definitely crying. His expression was that of laughter, but it was the first and last time he would ever smile so sadly again. Then, as we turned the corner and I could no longer see him, I broke out into tears once more, not taking my eyes away from the binoculars. One day you'll come back, right? I thought. I looked out over the green fields while reminiscing about my brother. Then, while I was thinking about him, I looked through the binoculars. That was when it happened. I saw the thing up close that I knew I should never see. Number 3. White Kunekune. Everybody I ask about this only gives me vague answers, so maybe somebody here can help me out. When I was in the 4th grade, one of my relatives opened a swimming school. I went and stayed there in the lodgings for the summer. The lodgings were right by the beach, so we often went swimming, fishing, and even mountain climbing. There were about 10 other elementary school students, as well as 4 teachers. I had a cousin the same age as me, and I quickly made friends with the others as well. We spent a great week together. It happened on the last day, I think. Unfortunately, a typhoon was approaching, and so we couldn't swim in the water. We had to stay in our rooms. We chatted, ate snacks, and watched some TV, and I stared at the ocean from our 2nd floor window. Massive grey waves crashed on the beach in the strong winds. Huh? What was that? I think a sound must have escaped my throat without realizing it. Before I knew it, Kei-chan was standing behind me and looking out the window as well. He was 2 years older than me, in the 6th grade, and he was great at catching bugs. Kei-chan seemed to notice what I was looking at as well, and his eyes opened wide. Something white was walking alongside the violently crashing waves on the beach. It was coming towards us. I couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman. Being nearsighted, I couldn't see very well. The figure didn't appear to be wearing any clothes, but was white from head to toe. Was it a pure white wetsuit? Did such a thing exist? The figure moved like it was trying to scoop something up from the ground, but its hands waved at high speed above its head. Suddenly, the kettle behind me started boiling and screeched loudly. No, that wasn't it at all. It was Kei-chan, screaming. One of the teachers burst into the room. A sound like that of a boiling kettle escaped Kei-chan's mouth over and over, and his feet slid across the tatami mats as the teacher dragged him from the window. After that, the head teacher and another took Kei-chan to the hospital, I think. Everyone was so scared that night that we put all our beds together and slept like that. Kei-chan never returned. A few years later, we had a family gathering and I saw my cousin again. I asked him about what happened that summer. For some reason, he grimaced. Kei-chan was suffering from stress or something and quit the swimming school immediately after. The school itself then closed shortly thereafter. All I wanted to ask was what Kei-chan had seen, but I couldn't bring myself to say it. Not long after that summer camp, I got glasses. But when I think about what might have happened if I'd gotten them sooner, well, Kei-chan's eyesight was so good that when we were exploring the forest, he could spot camouflaged bugs right away. No doubt about it, whatever was dancing on that beach, he had seen it clearly. Number 4. Black Kunekune. When I was in high school, I invited my friend over to my house, and we were chatting about this and that, when suddenly my mother burst through the front door and came tumbling inside. Confused at the strange sight, I approached her. "Please, I'm begging you, don't go outside into the rice fields," she said, over and over. Apparently, she had ridden her bicycle back from the shops through the rice fields, and she'd seen something black squirming and squiggling out there. Thinking it might have been a scarecrow, she stopped her bike to get a closer look. Then she saw that it had thin limbs like a person, and it was wiggling around on all fours. She was overcome by an indescribable fear and ran. "Okay," was the only thing I could say at the time. She calmed down, but once she was gone, my friend and I both agreed to secretly go check it out. It really was there. There was no wind, but there was something black out there, desperately squirming around. It wasn't just squirming though. It was slowly moving. Crap! By the time we realized it, it was already too late. Tears fell from my eyes, and my knees trembled in fear. My friend's lips trembled and his eyes clouded over. Needless to say, we ran from the place, crying. Why are things that squirm so terrifying? I have no answer for that, but there was this weird pressure coming off it that threatened to swallow us whole. I don't think it was anything of this world. Honestly, it terrified me. Number 5. White Thing. When I was an elementary student, we visited some quarry for a social studies trip. Suddenly, one of the kids in my group started laughing, like, "Hee hee hee." It almost sounded like he was crying. After that, he He started frothing at the mouth, and then he fell over. He was a pretty sickly kid to begin with, so I just thought he was having another fit. That was it. He soon woke up, so they didn't call an ambulance, but they sent him back to the bus to rest. I, being the group leader, was asked to go back and wait with him. He was sick, so it wasn't like there was much to talk about. So, you gonna have another fit? I asked casually. It was like that, but it wasn't a fit, he said. I saw some strange person before, a white figure, dancing. He. The he scared me coming from a kid, but at the time, ghost stories were all the rage at school, so I pressed him further. You saw that? You sure it wasn't a worker? What did he look like? Suddenly he glared at me hatefully. You're better off not knowing. He. If you see it once, you'll see it again and again. It's he. Got nothing to do with you. He. He started foaming at the mouth again and passed out. It goes without saying, as soon as we got back to school, I got called straight to the principal's office. What were you doing with that sick student? If anything happened, I think it was because of that white thing he saw. Number 6. Runner. I live in what people call a dense dormitory town, and I often see lots of people running marathons in the morning. I drink coffee from my second floor veranda and watch them running by. Every time I see them, it's like the start of my day. I see the same people, day in, day out. So over time, I've started to remember them. But this story is about a terrifying experience I had with a man who was out running during this same period of time. Good on him, running every morning, I thought at first when I saw him. But every time I saw him, I started to notice more and more strange things about him. He didn't sweat. He didn't breathe. And his footsteps made no sound. These 3 points. He ran a short distance from my balcony, so I thought at first that I was just seeing things. But when I compared him to the other runners, there really was something strange about him. Maybe he was a ghost, I thought. But he looked just like a healthy young runner with close cropped hair. So he seemed more odd than frightening. He had no doubt studied how to run, and that was why he looked that way, I thought. But I just couldn't get him off my mind, so I decided to take a closer look. I pretended to go downstairs to throw out my rubbish during his usual running time, and planned an ambush. Right on time, I saw him come running towards me. My heart pounded in my chest, yet I remained hopeful that it was all just one big misunderstanding. As he got closer, I realized that both his wrists were sparkling. What's that? I thought at first, but the 3 other points were still first and foremost in my mind. I didn't want our eyes to meet, so when he was about 30 meters away, I turned around and pretended to throw the garbage away in the designated trash spot. I thought at the very least I'd be able to confirm that he made a sound. But still, I was scared. Right around the time I figured he should have been passing by, I couldn't sense nor hear him at all. Honestly, I started to panic. I broke out into a cold sweat and my knees trembled. I couldn't even turn to look at his back as he passed me by. I stood there on the spot, waiting until I calmed down, and then slowly I looked around. He was long gone, and there was nobody else around either. I had no idea what was going on, and for a while I stood there, dumbfounded. As I turned to go back home, an old guy came running from the same direction. Sweat sparkled on his forehead, and his chest heaved painfully up and down as he ran. I was somewhat relieved. I bowed my head slightly as he passed. When I looked up again, I noticed a transparent, sparkling thread wrapped around both his wrists. I flashed back to the other runner, shocked, and turned around instinctively to watch the old guy as he disappeared into the distance. The same transparent thread that was around his wrists was also around his neck. But the scariest thing of all was the figure of the runner at the end of the path, his body twisting strangely to and fro, as though he were reeling the old guy. What happened to him and the old guy after that? I don't know. These days I start my mornings with the curtains closed. Number 7. The Happening in Noshiro. This is my scary story of what I think was Kunekune. It happened in Noshiro, Akita Prefecture, where it's commonly been known to appear. When I was in elementary school, probably 25 or so years ago, we went to visit a relative during the summer. We decided to go and collect some water shield herbs, so myself, my mother, and one of my relative's kids left the house. This swamp was only about 3 hectares large, so we split into 2 groups to go gathering. My mother by herself, and then us 2 kids. Suddenly, my mother screamed and fell into the water. Her scream was so frightening that I immediately ran back to the house to get help. I returned to the swamp with my grandfather, and my mother was sitting in it, muttering something incomprehensible, while the other kid was staring off into space, frozen on the spot. We put the 2 of them into a small wagon made of cane and took them back to the house. My grandfather cried the whole time. After that, the father of the house told us to quickly take them home and leave. "Why?" my grandfather asked. "Because they've seen something they shouldn't have." That was all he would say. After that, speaking of that house in our family became a taboo topic, so I don't know what things are like over there at present. When my grandfather died, they didn't even invite us to the funeral, however, so maybe what happened had something to do with that. As you may have noticed from these stories, Kunekune tends to have a few traits that it keeps across all of them, but it also comes in a wide variety of variations. In general, it's thought to be white, but it can also come in black, grey, or sometimes it's just not seen at all. But when it is seen, it's always seen moving in an unnatural manner, swaying and twisting, squirming and squiggling. This is what kunekune means in Japanese, so this is the one feature of it that never changes. This next story looks at yet another variation on the traditional Kunekune legend. This one's called Mountaintop Kunekune. About 20 years ago, when I was just a kid, maybe in kindergarten, I saw Kunekune. My father, younger brother, and myself sometimes went up into the mountains to have a picnic. The mountain was right nearby, but it wasn't our property, so we had to sneak in. Anyway, I didn't really like moving around a lot, so I didn't want to go. But my dad brought me a drink on the way. I got cola, while my younger brother got coffee-flavored milk. That was the only reason we went along. On our way up the mountain, our father pointed out things like a tengu's nose and a kitsune. In reality, it was a red fruit. We had loads of fun. Up until this point, I remember everything clearly, but after that, our father disappeared. It was just me and my younger brother. With our father missing, we were anxious, but I grabbed my brother's hand and pulled him towards the top of the mountain, crying that our father had to have gone on ahead of us. "Ma-kun, what's that?" My brother pointed to something about 100 meters ahead. Something grey, swaying side to side between the trees. We'd climbed this mountain numerous times, but never seen anything like that before. Its legs wriggled. I couldn't see its face. Then I remembered something. For my birthday, my dad had bought me a pair of binoculars. They were in my bag. I really wanted to know what that thing was, so I put my bag down and took the binoculars out. "Let me see! Let me see!" my brother said, but I told him later and peered at the thing through my binoculars. It was something I couldn't have imagined even in my wildest dreams. For 1, maybe 2 minutes, I couldn't tear my eyes off the thing, even though I didn't want to look at it anymore. If my brother hadn't kept calling out my name, what would have happened to me? Staring at that thing all alone. I think I might have gone mad. All I can say is this: it wasn't dancing. It was in pain. I saw its face. There were lots of faces. Men, women, boys, girls, old men, old women. It changed over and over, kind of like a slide changing at 1-second intervals. Yet every single one of them was in pain. I threw my bag, grabbed my brother, and ran back down the hill. We tripped numerous times, but I was far, far more scared of that thing than the pain. We ran into an old guy on the way, but all I could think about was getting off the mountain. After several minutes, I saw the familiar shrine gate, the exit. At that very moment, a voice behind us called out. It was our dad, and for some reason he was shouting. We ran over to him, crying, and I tried my best to tell him about the wriggling thing I saw between the trees, but I wasn't able to. According to him, he'd looked away for just a moment, and we disappeared. Apparently, we'd taken off without him. I haven't been back to that mountain ever since that day. I feel like I might see that thing again. Finally, let me say just one thing. The thing people call Kunekune really does exist. Kunekune is known to inflict madness. That's kind of its thing. And in this following story, a young man grows worried when his friend starts acting strange, squirming on the floor and muttering about something coming for him. Find out what in Dancing Kunekune. One of my friends is a slovenly pig. One day, I went over to his house and he was cooking some corn. Tiny drops kept falling from it, and when I looked closer, I realized they were bugs. "What the hell are you doing?" I screamed, panicking. "Ah, the corn's a bit old, but hey, there are people on TV from other countries who eat bugs, yeah? It's just like that. You want some?" "Nah, I'm good." "Well, then I'm gonna eat it all by myself." He tore into it, devouring it in seconds. "You're gonna get an upset stomach," I said. "There's nothing but lava in my gut," he said, grinning. I had no idea what he meant. About a week later, I went to his house again. He lived on the second floor of an old wooden apartment building. You could see half of his place from the road. So that night, I looked up at his apartment from the road, and beneath the fluorescent light, I could see his shadow jumping or dancing around or something. It was weird. Surprised, I climbed the stairs to his apartment and knocked on the door. All I got in reply was some weird sounds I didn't understand, like grun grun and unyan unyan. Nervous, I opened the door and he was lying on the tatami mats, squirming and twisting. All of the blood drained from my body, and it felt like my heart slowed to a stop. He muttered some more strange sounds when he saw me, and then started squirming across the ground towards me. "Hey, hey, hey!" I screamed, and suddenly he stood up. "Are you surprised?" he asked. "Quit screwing around. You scared the shit out of me." I was pissed, but when I looked at his face, his eyes were crazed. He wasn't looking at me, but some other point in the distance. "What is wrong with you?" I said, stepping inside. He was worrying me. "If I don't do this, it'll come." "What will?" "From above." "Huh? What the hell are you talking about?" "It comes from the corners of the room." "No, I mean, sometimes it comes from the drainage." It comes. It comes. It comes." "Sorry, I'm gonna go home now." "It comes. It comes. It comes." I left his apartment as he continued muttering, "It comes," behind me. Scared, I never went to see him again after that. I called his family and told them that he seemed to be exhausted, so I'd appreciate it if someone could go and check on him. According to another friend, he's apparently been isolated in some hospital, or he's off raising alpacas in Africa somewhere. I've heard all sorts of things, but I absolutely do not want to see him again. It might not sound that scary to you, but to me, it was terrifying. I was so scared I thought I might die. Even now, I still can't forget his unfocused eyes looking somewhere in the distance. Plus those final words he said. "It's coming. It's coming. It's coming." Having poor eyesight can come in handy, as this next story will attest to. A student on his way to the station spots something strange dancing in the distance. When he realizes what, well, find out what happens in Tracks. I'm still confused, but I've calmed down somewhat and I can write now, so please hear me out. I saw the often spoken about Kunekune, I think. I live way out in the countryside, and my ride to the nearest station is filled with nothing but rice fields, not even any streetlights. After reading Kunekune stories on various websites, I started to think that, hey, it wouldn't be that strange to see Kunekune somewhere out here. I'd love to see it sometime. Then this morning, as I was on my way to the station as always, I saw something black moving in the distance. It was to the right of me, about 100 meters in the distance on a slight hill. At first, I thought it was some old dude doing exercise, But then I realized the movements were getting stranger and stranger. The body was bending and twisting, and its arms were spinning around with unnatural speed. During radio taiso, there's a part where you spin your arms left and right, yeah? It was just like that, but on fast forward. I was tired from staying up all night, so I was just like, there sure are some strange people around here. And I hurried towards the station. And then I realized. That small hill, train tracks passed over it. That was why it was higher than everywhere else. Would someone really stand there to do exercises? Trains passed through there all morning for people to get to work. Even if it was someone not quite right in the head, those movements were a little... The blood drained from my body. The various stories I'd read about how you go mad once you see it floated around in my head, and I pedaled as fast as I could for the station, doing my best not to look anywhere towards the right. I couldn't stop shaking. I got to the station on time, but it appeared the thing had moved on from the tracks. Even on the train, I couldn't stop trembling. I've managed to calm down now, but thank God my eyesight is terrible. Nobody really knows what Kunekune looks like, because to look upon it is to go mad. Yet the man in this next story is pretty sure he did see it, at least from a distance. Find out why in Eyewitness. This is an experience I had that's been on my mind, so give me a minute. Have you ever heard of the scary story Kunekune? It's a pretty famous story, I think. There's a white thing out in the rice fields. I saw something just like that. It happened when I was in the first grade of elementary school. I left out the children's gate on my way home after school. We'd just moved to the area at the time, so I wasn't used to the way back home yet. I always went home with a bunch of friends who lived in the same area and somehow managed to get back. Anyway, on this day, I just happened to look to the right from the gate, towards the sports ground. Our school was in the countryside, so the sports ground was pretty big. And in the corner there was an arena, like what you see in sumo wrestling. Nobody wrestled at our school, but anyway. I noticed something standing by the side of the arena. It was white. At first I thought it was a sandbag maybe, but looking closer, it was moving. I concentrated and looked even harder at it. Then I saw something even more unbelievable. A white business shirt. No head, no hands, no lower body, yet it looked like a human. Its arms waved up and down slowly, as though it was calling me over. I thought it was more strange than scary, so I asked my friends, there were 5 or 6 of them there at the time, "Hey, can you see that?" Some could, some couldn't. That was when I got scared, and we all went home. Kunekune appears in rice fields, so I don't think it was that. But I saw this thing that was somewhat similar, so it terrified me. 1 year ago, I got lost at junior high and I was wandering around when suddenly all of the school lights went out. The only light left on was out in the school grounds. It was like a rest spot with a large pole and a small round roof. What's going on at this time of night? I thought. There was a group of people underneath that roof, and they seemed to be getting disciplined or something. They were all wearing white clothes. There were dozens of them, and they all imitated one person's movements. I don't know how to describe it. It was like martial arts or dance or something. I don't know. Even if it was for club, there were no clubs that had any type of movement like that. Kunekune, I thought and laughed, but the movements were so strange that I actually got scared. On a whim, I narrowed my eyes and looked closer. Not a single one of them had anything that looked like human-colored skin. They were like paper in the shape of humans, and they kept dancing around over and over. I suddenly remembered how if you looked at Kunekune with binoculars in the stories, then you'd go mad. So I quickly got the hell out of there. If you're interested in learning more about Kunekune, I'll be posting a video on the Kowabana YouTube channel tomorrow, or next week for you lovely early bird patrons, looking into the legend and how it came about. You can find that at youtube.com/Kowabana Japan. And if you're looking for even more Kowabana episodes to tide you over between releases, you can get access to over 100 bonus stories right now at patreon.com/TaraADevlin and help support the show at the same time. In the meantime, I hope you're staying safe in these trying times, and I'd like to thank you for choosing to spend some of that time with this podcast. It really means a lot to me. Stay safe, everyone, and I'll see you again next time for even more Kowabana, true Japanese scary stories from around the internet. Want even more scary stories? Head over to kowabana.net for new translations every week. You can also join our Patreon for exclusive stories you won't find anywhere else. Head over to kowabana.net now.